The silent betrayal of the royal guard. What went wrong at Windsor? Welcome to our channel. Today we have a thrilling story from the heart of Windsor Castle that you won't want to miss. It's a tale of a missing heirloom, a silent gesture, and the unseen dedication of a royal guard. As you watch, we'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let us know. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next intriguing chapter we have for you. Tomorrow, stay with us, and let's uncover the hidden secrets behind a small move on the rifle and the mystery behind the vanished watch at Windsor Castle. The grand halls of Windsor Castle were always filled with an air of solemnity and tradition. Nestled in the heart of the castle, in a carefully guarded room, hung a piece of history, a vintage clock that had been a symbol of honor and precision for generations. The clock had been passed down since the reign of King George V, a priceless artifact that had witnessed centuries of royal events. It was not just a timepiece, but a mark of the discipline, pride, and attention to detail that the guards upheld in their sacred duty. This clock, mounted in the prestigious position of the guard post, was an unspoken yet integral part of every ceremony, every event, and every moment of silence in the castle. It ticked steadily, like the heartbeat of Windsor itself. The guards, immobile and stoic, stood watch beside it, as if the very essence of the castle's legacy rested in their stillness. Its presence was a quiet reminder of the weight of their duty. One early morning, something extraordinary happened, something that would go unnoticed by most, but not by those who knew the castle's rhythms, the guards' movements, and the rituals of the palace. The clock, that cherished symbol of royal ceremony, was gone. At first, it seemed like a trivial oversight. The guards at the station noticed it, but no one immediately acted. No alarm sounded. No one saw a figure creeping through the halls in the dead of night. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints left behind, no evidence of a break-in. The missing clock didn't make a sound as it disappeared, leaving behind only the subtle shift in the atmosphere. The absence of this seemingly small object cast a shadow over the castle that couldn't be ignored, yet no one dared to speak of it openly. A strange silence fell over the barracks. The men who had been assigned to watch over the clock stood in disbelief. Their minds raced through the possibilities. Had the clock simply been moved for repairs, or was there something more sinister at play? Their training, their discipline, and their respect for royal traditions all told them that the clock's disappearance was far from ordinary. But they were instructed to remain silent, to not discuss it, and wait for internal verification. The chain of command had spoken. The rest was not for them to solve. However, this silence didn't sit well with one of the guards, an experienced man who had stood watch over the castle's treasures for years. His sharp eyes, accustomed to the subtle shifts in the castle's environment, had caught something unusual. It wasn't the absence of the clock itself that troubled him, but something else, a small yet telling detail that only someone with years of service would recognize. The night before the disappearance, he had noticed something off about his replacement guard, a young man who had taken over the post. The young guard had been holding his rifle with his left hand. To an outsider, this might seem like a small thing, an insignificant detail, but to someone trained in the precise rituals of the royal guard, it was glaringly unusual. Every guard, every ceremony, every movement was meticulously trained, and the posture of holding a rifle in the right hand was as sacred as the clock itself. The guard's deviation from protocol wasn't just a mistake, it was a crack in the veneer of discipline that had been upheld for centuries. The veteran guard, unable to speak or act on his suspicions, could only watch and wait. His mind was swirling with questions, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had the young man been involved in the disappearance, or was there a deeper conspiracy at play? He couldn't say for sure, but the unusual left-handed grip on the rifle gnawed at him. It was something he couldn't ignore, something that demanded attention. And so the mystery of the vanished clock began, quietly, silently, but with a growing sense of urgency. The guards, loyal to their duty, stood still, their eyes never leaving their posts. their hearts heavy with the weight of what had transpired. But in the stillness, in the absence of the clock, there was something more that lingered. Something the royal guards knew. Something that even the quietest of gestures could reveal. As the hours passed, the heavy silence in the barracks grew more unbearable. The mystery of the missing clock hung over them, pressing down on every soldier, every officer, every servant who passed through the castle's grand halls. No one spoke of it, but the unease was palpable. It was as if the heart of Windsor itself had been stolen in the dead of night, leaving only a quiet echo of uncertainty. For the veteran guard, the discomfort was unbearable. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. The missing clock wasn't just an object, it was a symbol. It was more than just a piece of history. It was a vital part of the order that held this place together. And he knew, deep down, that someone had taken it. Someone who knew exactly how to erase their tracks, someone who understood the intricate dance of the palace. But what troubled him the most wasn't the clock itself. No, it was the strange behavior of his fellow guard, the young man who had replaced him the night before. It had been subtle, almost imperceptible, but it didn't escape the veteran's watchful eyes. He had seen the young guard's grip on his rifle. The left hand. It shouldn't have been there. The veteran guard knew that every royal guard was trained in a strict, specific way. The right hand was always the hand that gripped the rifle. It was ingrained in them from the start, a reflex that became second nature. So why had this young man held the weapon with his left? Was it a mistake, or was it something far more deliberate? That one detail, that simple but glaring deviation from protocol, lingered in his mind like an itch he couldn't scratch. It gnawed at him as he stood motionless at his post, his eyes scanning the castle's halls, watching for any sign, any clue that could confirm his suspicions. He couldn't act on his own. He couldn't speak. But he knew what he had to do. The guard's training kicked in. He had learned, over years of service, that in moments of crisis, in times when things felt wrong, a small, silent gesture could speak volumes. And so, when his replacement came on shift the next day, the veteran guard's eyes were already trained on him, waiting, watching. He knew the young man would slip into his usual routine, unaware of the silent scrutiny that was about to unfold. With a subtle movement, the veteran guard tapped the rifle at his side just once, then again. 2 quick, deliberate taps on the muzzle of his rifle, a signal, a warning. To anyone who understood, it was enough to know that something was off, something was wrong. It wasn't just the clock, it was the whole system, the integrity of the guard, the sacredness of the ritual. That was being tested. The tap was almost imperceptible, a slight motion, yet to anyone trained in the ways of the royal guard, it was a call to attention, a request for investigation. The officer, a seasoned leader with years of experience, had been standing in the background, watching the guards as they performed their duties. He caught the signal immediately, his eyes narrowing as he understood the message. Without a word, he moved swiftly, his footsteps silent on the marble floors as he signaled for a quiet inspection. The young guard, unaware of the eyes watching him, continued his duties, standing tall in his post, his back straight, his rifle held firmly in his hands. He never once looked back, never once questioned the man who stood behind him. Silently, observing, but the veteran guard's mind was racing. What was happening here? Was this a simple mistake, or was there something deeper at play? His instincts told him it was the latter. He had been in the palace long enough to know when things didn't add up. This wasn't just about the clock. This was about trust, about loyalty, and about something far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. And so, with each passing second, the tension mounted. The guard stood still, his eyes never leaving the young man, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, searching for answers. Something was wrong. Something was hidden beneath the surface. And as the officer moved in to quietly begin the investigation, the veteran guard knew that whatever was about to unfold, it would shake the very foundation of Windsor Castle itself. The officer moved silently into position. The veteran guard remained frozen, his posture unyielding, his eyes never leaving his post. His heart beat steadily, but his mind was in turmoil. He had seen something, the left-handed grip on the rifle. That single detail, the one the young guard had thought was so insignificant, had set off a chain of events that could not be undone. The veteran guard's eyes were sharp, his focus laser-like. He had seen how the young guard moved, how his body shifted in ways that were too fluid, too unnatural. The subtle hesitations in his stance, the way his rifle seemed to sway ever so slightly in his hands. It wasn't just a guard out of place, it was a pattern that pointed directly to the missing clock, to a breach of trust, to a betrayal that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. 2 quick taps on the rifle muzzle. That was all it had taken. A signal, a warning. A message passed silently between 2 guards who understood the gravity of what was unfolding. The officer, now standing in the shadows, watched carefully, his eyes narrowing as he caught the subtle gesture. He was no fool. He knew exactly what was being communicated. The veteran guard had broken no rules, given no direct orders, but he had set in motion an investigation that would expose the truth behind the theft. His hand had moved ever so slightly, almost imperceptibly, tapping twice on the rifle. In the world of the Royal Guard, that action spoke volumes. It was a call to action, a demand for answers. The officer took a deep breath, signaling for 2 more guards to join him. They moved swiftly, without a sound, through the castle's long, shadowed hallways, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpets and ancient stone floors. In the quiet, behind the scenes, a search began, swift but thorough. The officer's mind raced as he processed what could be unfolding. This wasn't a simple case of a missing clock. This was about something far more critical: loyalty, deception, and the dark secrets that lingered behind the castle's imposing walls. The young guard, unaware of the storm swirling just behind him, continued his duties. His gaze remained forward, his expression as unreadable as the stone beneath his feet. But there was something in the air, a tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife. His every move was being scrutinized, watched by a man who had been trained to detect even the smallest deviation from the norm. Seconds passed, then minutes. The young guard didn't flinch, didn't waver. But the veteran guard could feel it in his gut. Something was about to break. He knew the officer would uncover the truth. They had always been loyal to the crown, but there was no room for weakness in their ranks. The Royal Guard was built on discipline, on precision, on trust, and if that trust was broken, the consequences would be severe. Then, a muffled shout echoed through the hallways, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. The officer had found something. The quiet search had turned up an unexpected lead, something no one had anticipated. The young guard had made a mistake, a small one, but one that could not be ignored. His uniform, meticulously cleaned, had a slight imperfection, a tear barely noticeable but enough to raise suspicion. It was the same mark that had been left years ago on a soldier discharged for misconduct, a man who had been dishonorably removed from duty after being caught in a theft scheme. The veteran guard's heart raced. This wasn't just an unfortunate accident. This wasn't just a guard slipping up. This was a calculated move, a move that was now unraveling. The officer's shout confirmed what they had feared. The young guard wasn't who he claimed to be. He had been expelled from the service 3 years ago for breaking the rules, for violating the sacred trust of the Royal Guard. The officer's eyes locked with the veteran guards, and without a word, the truth was clear. They had caught the thief. The clock was gone, but the real crime wasn't the missing timepiece. It was the betrayal that had been quietly hidden in plain sight, a betrayal that had nearly gone unnoticed, if not for the sharp eyes and steady hands of one man, the one who stood still when everyone else moved. The veteran guard knew, as the investigation unfolded, that the castle's secrets ran much deeper than anyone could have guessed. The clock was just the beginning. The investigation unfolded quickly, the quiet murmur of footsteps echoing through the castle's long corridors. The veteran guard, still at his post, stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the young man, whose every movement had now become a potential clue. The officer, flanked by two other guards, moved silently, the weight of the situation settling heavily on their shoulders. They knew this wasn't just about the clock anymore. It was about trust, loyalty, and the very foundation of the Royal Guard. As they approached the young guard's post, the officer signaled for the others to stand back. The castle was silent, save for the faint rustle of uniforms and the occasional creak of old wood. The tension was unbearable, thick as smoke. The officer stepped forward, his voice low but clear. "Private," he began, his tone unwavering, "we need to speak with you." The young guard, his face unreadable, nodded slowly. He had no idea that the net was closing around him. His thoughts were far from suspicion, still caught in the monotony of his duty, the rhythms of the day that had always seemed so safe. But something was different now. He could feel the weight of their stares, the pressure mounting in the air. He turned to face the officer, trying to maintain composure. Without warning, the officer's hand moved to the guard's uniform. The motion, swift, practiced. It was the first sign that the investigation had gone deeper than he had anticipated. The young guard stiffened, his heart racing. He couldn't understand why this was happening, why he was being singled out. "We've found something," the officer continued, his voice tinged with the coldness of finality. The words were like a hammer, cracking the facade of calm that had held the guard together. "A detail we missed the first time, this tear in your uniform. It's the same pattern we saw years ago. Do you remember, Private? Do you remember?" "What happened to your predecessor?" The young guard's face paled. His eyes flickered for a moment, a flash of recognition crossing them. He knew exactly what the officer was referring to. The man who had once worn his uniform. The man who had been caught stealing from the very palace they all swore to protect. The man who had been dishonorably discharged 3 years ago. But that wasn't all. The officer knew something else. The rifle. The left-handed grip. It had been the key all along, a detail that no one could have dismissed. The young guard opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He was trapped, unable to defend himself. The officer had pieced it together. He knew the truth now, and there was no escaping it. The young guard had infiltrated the Royal Guard under false pretenses. He had stolen the clock, an item so sacred to the palace, intending to sell it on the black market. His left-handed grip on the rifle had been a mistake, one that exposed him. A mistake he thought no one would notice. The officer's eyes narrowed as he saw the guard's expression shift. The truth was out now, written on his face. There was no denial left in him. He was caught. "Take him," the officer ordered, his voice cold as steel. 2 guards stepped forward, their hands firm but respectful as they seized the young man's arms. There was no resistance. His shoulders slumped as the reality of his actions came crashing down. As they led the young guard away, the veteran guard watched silently from his post, his heart heavy with a mixture of relief and disappointment. He had known something was off the moment he had seen the left-handed grip, but the betrayal still stung. He had served alongside this man, trusted him, to protect the castle's most sacred treasures, and yet, in the end, the clock wasn't the only thing stolen. The young guard would be dishonorably discharged, just as his predecessor had been. His name would be erased from the records, his uniform returned to the arsenal, and his memory discarded like a piece of old parchment. But in the eyes of the veteran guard, there was something more that would never fade. It wasn't about the clock or the theft or the punishment. It was the quiet, invisible betrayal that had cut deeper than any weapon. And as the veteran guard resumed his post, standing tall and unmoving, his eyes cast down at the empty space where the clock once hung, he knew that the real honor, the real reward, was in preserving the trust of the palace. A trust that could never be broken, no matter how many secrets were buried in its halls. The weight of silence hung over Windsor Castle like a heavy fog. As the young guard was led away, the veteran guard returned to his post, his mind still racing. He had witnessed a betrayal, but it wasn't just any betrayal. This was a break in the foundation of something sacred. the Royal Guard's honor. And though the clock had been recovered, the real damage had been done in the shadows, away from the eyes of the public, where trust had been irreparably broken. The officer who had uncovered the truth stood a few paces away, his eyes fixed on the veteran guard. There was no praise, no acknowledgement for his quiet vigilance, but there didn't need to be. The veteran knew that his actions had spoken louder than words ever could. Still, the sting of disappointment lingered in his chest. He had always believed that the men he stood alongside, the men he fought to protect, were beyond reproach. But as the young guard had fallen from grace, so too had the illusion of perfection within their ranks. The veteran guard's hand tightened slightly around the hilt of his rifle. He had upheld the rules, followed every procedure, never once faltering in his duties. But in that fleeting moment of clarity, when he had made the decision to silently signal for the investigation, he had uncovered a truth that haunted him, a truth that there were cracks in the very institution he had sworn to protect, cracks that could no longer be ignored. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the castle's stone walls, the veteran guard stood still, his mind far from the peaceful calm the setting sun would suggest. He thought of the young man, of how his once pristine reputation had crumbled so quickly, so silently. The betrayal was not just about the clock or the theft. It was about something much deeper. It was about trust, about the promise that each man in the Royal Guard made to uphold their sacred duties without fail. And in this case, that promise had been broken. The young guard's actions had forced the hand of the officers, but it was the quiet, unspoken gesture of the veteran guard, the wee-wee tap on the rifle's muzzle, that had set everything in motion. The officer's eyes had understood the signal immediately. There had been no word spoken, no instructions given, but the message had been clear. A violation had occurred, and it was up to them to uncover the truth. The veteran guard had kept his composure throughout the ordeal, never once wavering in his duty. But inside, he had felt the burn of betrayal. The castle, a place so steeped in tradition and honor, had become a place where deceit had quietly crept in, hidden beneath the surface, unnoticed by all but a few. As the day wound down, the veteran guard remained at his post, his eyes trained on the empty space where the clock had once hung. He had seen the young man's face change when the truth had been revealed, seen the way his shoulders had slumped as the officers had led him away. The guard had known then that the punishment would be swift and certain. There would be no public recognition of the veteran's actions, no cheers or applause, just the cold, silent weight of knowing that his duty had been fulfilled. The young guard would be dishonorably discharged, his name erased from the records, and his fate sealed. The clock, that symbol of honor, would be returned to its rightful place, and the guards would return to their usual routines. But the veteran guard knew that things would never be the same. The trust that had held them all together, the sacred bond of the Royal Guard, had been broken. And once broken, trust was a hard thing to rebuild. As he stood unmoving, his thoughts drifted back to the young guard. It had been a small mistake, a momentary lapse, but in the world they lived in, those moments were enough to destroy everything. The veteran guard had seen this happen before, in the eyes of soldiers who had faltered, who had let personal demons cloud their judgment, and now it had happened again. But despite the darkness that had crept into Windsor Castle that day, the veteran guard refused to let it break him. He stood tall, unwavering in his commitment, and though he knew the castle's walls held secrets that would never be revealed to the public, he also knew that he had done what was right. He had preserved the integrity of the Royal Guard, even if it meant exposing a painful truth. The sound of footsteps echoed through the halls, but the veteran guard remained unmoved. He was a symbol of the Guard's enduring strength, of the quiet discipline that had seen the Royal Guard through centuries of history. And in that moment, with the castle bathed in the fading light of day, he knew that honor, no matter how fragile, would always endure in the heart of those who stood watch. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's story. What do you think? About the young guard's betrayal and the veteran guard's quiet vigilance? Was his subtle gesture enough to set everything in motion, or should there have been a more direct approach? The Royal Guard has always been a symbol of discipline and honor, but this story proves that even in the most sacred institutions, trust can be broken in the blink of an eye. Do you think the young guard deserved the punishment he received? Or was there more to his actions than met the eye? We'd also love to know what you think about the role of small, unnoticed gestures in upholding justice. Have you ever experienced a moment where a small action made a huge difference, even though it went unspoken? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might just shed light on parts of the story we missed. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next exciting chapter in our series. Your support helps us continue bringing these stories to life.